attending sudden deaths has always come through quite strongly in our research. It's often reported as being officers' worst experience is their first sudden death. So we know that already that it's an issue as an incident. In terms of cumulative exposure, we also know that over 60% of officers have said that they don't really have time to process one incident, such as a sudden death, before going to the next. So we also have to bear in mind that the brain needs a certain amount of time to file and acknowledge something that's happened before it prepares itself for the next. And I think that's really where we need to try and offer a little bit of support. And we're not talking about suddenly magicking up some time where people can have a nice decompression, a nice debrief and a trim and sit down, have a cup of coffee and bond. The reality is they're probably not going to have time to do that. So what we're looking at now is really trying to keep the communication up and offer some practical techniques that officers can take on themselves. And it could be as simple as just taking a few breaths. Like when an incident that they've been to is over, that they have some sort of safety cue that it's finished and it's time to kind of reset and move on to the next one, that people just take a moment, feel their feet on the ground, take a few long exhales to breathe out, regulate that stress response back down to normal again, and just try, and it sounds very bizarre, but a very, very useful technique that we use in neuropsychology is to engage in abstract thought to stop your stress response. So if you can think of that incident that you've just been to and in your mind describe it with a colour or a texture or a sound or a funny saying or an image, and give it some sort of unusual label, it helps the brain to identify it as something in itself and stops you building up and up and up and up, one on top of the other, each of these sudden deaths and each of these incidents, so that it becomes one big, unmanageable, indistinguishable force of anxiety. If we break each one down and make sure that we take a moment, file it in a way that's unusual, describe it as it is, understand that it's past, and just take a few moments to do that, that might just help prevent that cumulative load. Obviously, we really need to keep an eye on how much we're being exposed to. And I would always recommend, if you do think that what you're being called out to is unreasonable and just not processable for one person in one day, that you put your hand up and say so, because it's only going to come back on the team later if people aren't being looked after. So it makes practical sense just to flag up and say, actually, I've been to however many in so many days, just to give supervisors and managers a chance to intervene or help if they can.